Hi, my name is Ines Doorly. Thank you for hearing my testimony. I first want to say that I have empathy for both sides. I think that we're all affected by this, and this is an all-inclusive thing. I am a homegrown from Oregon, and my dad put on a blue-collar budget, raised 7 of us in Lake Oswego, and he did it by his rentals. He worked hard, swung a hammer, and he was able to keep rents low but constant. So here I am at retirement age and not being totally prepared. So I, too, with my husband, worked very hard and were able to buy a couple properties. We're just a small mom-pop shop, too. And what I would like to say is to keep the no-show costs. It is cost-effective for the community. It allows higher quality of living, and it keeps more rental homes on the market. Number one, crime. The neighbors will come up and say, yeah, we got a problem over there. It looks like a meth house or a grow shop or a gang hangout. Well, you get them to testify, and no, it's too dangerous for them. So the easiest way for the landlord is to do a no-show cause. And this allows, if we don't do this, it's going to put more burdens on the courts. It's going to put more burdens on the police department. It's going to be more burdens on the fire department, because this is just shifting money around. Also, when we deplete the inventory, because this is what the landlords are talking about, these people like me, the small mom and pop shops, they can't afford it. They can't carry 2 house or 3 house payments. And it costs money to turn over a house. It's very expensive for us. So what happens is when the market dries up, a lot of these people, I'm in the sandwich generation. That means that there's a lot of our young parents can't afford the daycare at $950 a month per child, or great grandma that has to go in the home for $3,000 to $5,000 a month. So what do? They move back home. And we're watching the little kids and the parents. Thank you for my time.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to testify today. My name is Pat Costello. I am a landlord in Lane County, in Eugene, Springfield. My partner and I have 42 units in the Whitaker area, which is a lower income area of Eugene. One is a 35-unit apartment complex we bought 19 years ago, which was, at the time, had the nickname of Felony Flats. It had some problems, and we've cleaned it up and try to manage the apartment well and maintain it properly. But we do take a higher risk tenant. I've also been a director of the Rental Owners Association for 15 plus years in Lane County. We have about 950 landlords as members and represent about 13,500 rental units in the Lane County area. And my concern is, although we've been able to manage a problem tenant mix, and I think we've probably only done 2 or 3 no-cause notices over the years. The members of our association, I believe, in talking to them, are concerned about how to deal with it. And I think that the net result is going to be that there'll be some unintended consequences for the tenants, in that they'll probably be less willing to rent to risky tenants. And secondly, that they may require higher deposits. So I think that's a net possible negative effect for all of our tenants, for our prospective tenants. My other concern about the rent control side is that, and Scott, I think, sent you an article that typically in communities where rent control has been in place, you wind up with fewer new units developed, and you wind up with lower quality maintenance. So I suggest, or my recommendation would be to vote against the proposed bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Radha Cruz, and first I want to thank you guys for allowing us to testify and for being here. I know it's been probably, you guys have been overwhelmed with all of our emails, calls, and, everything else going on. I've been a housing provider, because I'm not going to call myself as a landlord, because it doesn't, the word just, I've been a housing provider since 2005. Myself and my brother, who's with me today. We invest in rental property as a form as retirement. We have another, we're self-employed business that most of the times subsidizes lower rent for our tenants. What I'm hearing from people that are testifying here or the news media, they're making everybody sound like they're monsters, greedy, and we're not like that. Something breaks, just to give you examples, we take care of it right away because we want the good tenants. It's really expensive for us to have turnover. But what I don't like about the HB 2004, going away with no-cause evictions, you'd be amazed how since 2005, we've used it a few times, to be honest with you, just to, it's less expensive for us from having to go through an attorney, probably hiring a private investigator. We've had instances of trafficking in one of the units. We've had menacing tenants, targeting other tenants. I've had racial slurs thrown at me. Dog poop after my regular job, spending 12, 15 hours a day at my other job, having to go pick it up because there was unauthorized animals, pets, and unauthorized tenants. I'm here to ask you guys, how are you going to prove that? Any of you guys landlords? If we went for costs, how are we going to prove it without an expensive attorney? And I had a couple of other ones, but I guess my time is up. But honestly, you guys really have to be landlords or housing providers to understand what we go through. Thank you. Okay.
Madam Chair, Speaker Kotek, members of the committee, my name is Tia Politi, and I am a co-owner of 5 mortgaged rental properties. I'm also the president of the Rental Owners Association of Lane County, representing more than 1,000 members. I am a delegate to the Oregon Rental Housing Association and the general manager of Acorn Property Management in Springfield. I continued to teach renters rehab for St. Vincent de Paul. I was also privileged to be a part of Operation 365 in my local area, which succeeded in housing more than 400 homeless veterans. I've been a tenant all of my growing up years. My children are currently tenants. My tenants are my valued customers. Oregon has a housing supply problem, but forced payment of moving costs and the elimination of no-cause notices of termination won't solve that problem. Developers created a crisis for residents in Portland, many of them long-term residents. But the proposed legislative solution offered by House Bill 2004 creates a draconian punishment for all rental owners that will result in less available and affordable housing for all. As a property manager, taking away my ability to terminate a tenancy without cause will make it much more difficult for me to protect the safety of my residents by forcing me to prove in a court of law that a problem exists. Many tenants are rightfully terrified to even report a problematic neighbor, much less testify in open court. We don't need more restrictions, we need more housing. We need legislators who are willing to address the shortage of affordable housing with creative solutions. That could include allowing communities of tiny houses or offering tax incentives to build more affordable housing. In my area, the only tax incentives people get are large developers building high-end units for campus residents. Please don't, if big out-of-state developers need to be reined in, let's do that. But please don't lay the sins of the marketplace at the feet of private landlords. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Joyce Keene. I work at Lewis & Clark Law School. For 16 years, I lived in Southeast Portland in Representative Powers' district, and I just recently moved to Representative Sanchez's district, so I partly apologize for coming out against one of your first bills. I'm not totally opposed to HB 2004, but as of 5 months ago, my husband and I became first-time landlords. We bought and lived in our old house for 16 years, and this summer we decided to move, but we wanted to keep our old house as a rental. It was the smallest house on the block, and we didn't want to see it, bought by a developer and torn down so that some big box could go up, because we'd seen that all over our neighborhood. The house needed some work to become a legal rental, and with massive loans, we spent $20,000 making it a nice house. At the rent we charge, we're not going to see a dime of profit on it in probably 5 years. I thought we were doing the right thing, putting a small house on the market in a town that desperately needs it. We took a class on how to be a landlord, and we plan on following all the laws, at least the ones that that were on the books before. But we want to be good landlords. We thought the laws were fairly balanced, and our house is going to be our retirement plan. Now I'm scared for my investment, and I'm seriously considering selling my house. And I question what problem this bill will actually solve. I think it's going to have a chilling effect on small-time landlords like me and concentrate home ownership in the hands of fewer people and corporations. This ordinance assumes that landlords all have more money than their tenants. In my case, that is not true. Our tenant makes more money than my husband and I put together. So if I suddenly had a financial emergency and I needed to get him out in a hurry, which is 90 days, I can assure you it's not because I'm greedy. It's because I'm having a financial emergency and I have to pay him $9,000 to get him out of the house. Big developers and landlords might be able to afford that, but I can't. I don't want to be a landlord forever. House Bill 2004 makes it fairly impossible for me to stop being one if my tenant wants to continue renewing their lease forever. Thank you for your time.
Members, my name is Alan Huster. I'm a landlord from Albany. I was here this morning listening to the testimony, and it seemed to me that enough speakers have been pointing out the undesirable effects of eliminating the no-cause notice, but I'd like to share with you a couple situations I've been in that relate more to the lease renewal and the rent control portions of the bill. I have a 3-bedroom unit very close to Oregon State University that I like to rent out to a group of students, usually, with a single lease. But a couple of years ago, a tenant had to leave in the middle of the lease, and the other 2 roommates didn't have anybody in mind to replace them. So I went out, I advertised, I found a 3rd tenant to move in with them. But they were reluctant, understandably, to have a lease together with somebody they didn't know in both directions. So I broke up the lease into 3 separate leases, basically rented it out by the room for the remainder of the school year. This worked out well for all of us. But if this bill that's proposed had been law, that would have left me in a situation at the end of that lease term where if any one of those tenants had decided to stay on, I would have had to keep them. And then I'm out looking for roommates that want to move in with this person to fill the other 2 bedrooms. That's a very difficult task. I would not have gone down that road to this very equitable solution for everybody if this had been law at that point in time. Regarding rent control, last year there was a lockout at a factory in Albany, and one of my tenants was affected. During this period, I helped them out by giving them a significant rent reduction. If rent control was in place, it would have taken years for me to get back up, even to the pre-lockout rent.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would have hurt my business for years to do this for them.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening. My husband and I own 4 rental units in Portland, and we manage. Oh, Aaron Madden.
Thank you.
We manage these properties ourselves. We take care of the yards. We undertake repairs as soon as we find out they're needed, and we make improvements so that our rental units are good value for our tenants. We have chosen an investment strategy that keeps us out of the faceless corporate machine of the stock market, and we appreciate the human connection and accountability that's inherent in our chosen investment strategy. And as a landlord, I support rent stabilization, and I support that portion of HB 2004. However, I have great concerns about this landlord for life bill that takes all control over the use of our properties away from us, the homeowners, and puts it in the hands of our tenants. I have invested significant capital in these properties. I continually perform maintenance, and I have committed to repay mortgages on each of them. And that should give me a right to decide how I utilize the property and whether it continues to be a rental. But Section 1.4 sub C of this bill removes my ability to make any decisions about the use of my property other than it will continue to be a rental for as long as my tenant wants to renew their lease. I could become a landlord for life. So if my father-in-law, who was recently diagnosed with cancer, needs financial assistance, I would be prohibited from selling my property as long as my tenant continues to renew their lease. I have no option in that matter. If I take a job in another state, I would be forced to be a long-distance landlord, so long as my tenants continue to choose to renew their leases. I would like to make some modifications to this bill that I would suggest would make it supportable. I would remove the mandatory lease renewal requirement and allow fixed-term leases to expire on their own terms to avoid us becoming landlords for life. I would provide an absolute exemption for the sale of a single-family home. Selling a home while tenants living there is totally reckless, and requiring notification after the sale is not in anyone's best interest. I would reduce or remove the relocation assistance requirement so that small landlords like me can continue to afford to own rental property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for letting me talk this evening with you and let me know what's in my heart.
What's your name for the record, please?
I am Silvia and I came to United States 35 years ago. I've been working very, very hard, and finally I got some homes for rent. I thought it's gonna be an amazing job to provide people for rent, and I finding that it's very, very hard in both sides. I finding terrible people. I've been afraid. I've been devastated of things that people have done to me in giving my best faith for people to have a home. This is really is getting hard to rent and getting hard for me to be able to keep as a landlord. But I'm here because I believe that 30-day no cost is very important to have, even for both, as much as a tenant as a landlord. It's mistaken because the 30-day notice, the tenant can go to the judge and against that 30-day notice. It's not true that they don't have anything after the 30-day notice. If you give a tenant 30-day notice without no cost, that doesn't mean that they need to move immediately. They still can go to court and be proved. It's like you said, you always have the right to be proved that you are doing something wrong. So for me to give a 30-day notice, no cost, is more important than give them a cost, because they will have a mark in the record for the rest of their lives to rent a house somewhere else. So they will keep them having that bad record. But if you give them a 30-day no cost, or 60 days no cost, they will have the right to go to appeal it and talk to the judge, and the judge will have the decision on saying it's right or wrong.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Dear representatives, my name is Ron Seaver. I represent myself and family and ask that you put yourselves in my shoes before you vote on this proposed legislation. In 1980, my wife Maggie and I rented farmland in a farmhouse. I farmed and Maggie provided preschool daycare. It was a wonderful lifestyle and one of the best times in our life. However, after 7 years of bliss, we realized it was too difficult to earn a living and provide a family income. At the time, I recall feeling like a quitter and a failure. That is until we sold off the farm machinery assets. We had $20,000 from the sale of farm machinery that we used as down payment for our first home. My wife and I can attest that the down payment money was all sweat equity. We purchased that house, which is our current home, in 1987 for $62,500. After our substantial down payment, the previous owner carried the remaining balance on a 15-year mortgage. We put off vacations, new cars, and coffee drinks to pay for our house earlier rather than later. In 2002, we put down payment money on a triplex on Rural Avenue here in Salem. The triplex was built in 1954. The first thing we did was remove the siding, install new energy-efficient windows, blew in insulation into the walls. Subsequently, we have upgraded appliances, countertops, flooring, replaced toilets with water savers, lighting with efficient fluorescent and now LED. And then a couple of years ago, we had a collapsed Orangeburg sewer pipe that we replaced. Despite the expense, we have always valued providing quality and affordable homes for our tenants. Subsequently, we cashed in my Roth IRA retirement and invested in 3 more houses. Lastly, in January 2014,
Submit
thank you
your
so much.
testimony. Thank you. Thank you very much.
My name is Mathew Gill, and I'm a landlord in Portland. I invested in real estate to provide a stable retirement income. I own 4 properties in Oregon. I provide good quality properties for people to rent, any one of which I would live in myself. I recently spent $18,000 to upgrade the heating systems in one of my duplexes so that the tenants would have energy-efficient heat and air conditioning. I am against this and all other legislation that targets landlords and prevents us from being in control of the properties that we paid for and pay to maintain. If the tenant is damaging my properties, I need to have a way to get them out. Not in 3 months, but as soon as possible before they do more damage. And I should not have to pay for their moving expenses. This type of feel-good legislation does little to protect tenants and will do much more to make it difficult to find available rentals. If the state and city of Portland make it too difficult to be a landlord, I and many property owners like me will sell our rentals and invest our money elsewhere. Every house that sells in the city will be sold to a family and will no longer be in the rental market. So by passing this type of legislation, you will be reducing the available rental housing in Portland. This kind of legislation will also result in higher rents and higher damage deposits. Landlords need to have a way to protect themselves. The City of San Francisco and New York City both have this kind of rent control legislation, and they have the highest rents in the nation. Landlords in Oregon are not the problem. The problem is facing a housing shortage, especially for low-income people. The city of Portland and state of Oregon need to step up and do the only thing that is going to solve this problem, and that is to subsidize low-income and middle-income housing on a large scale. Restricting landlords is not the answer to Portland's housing issues.
Thank you.
My name is Laurie Kovac. I am against the current proposals that the legislature has to allow rent controls to be imposed, no-cause evictions to be restricted, and relocation expenses to be paid for on behalf of a tenant. Landlords are not the enemy. Landlords have made the decision to invest their money to provide a home for a tenant instead of investing their money in stocks, bonds, or businesses. This is a choice they can change. By imposing continuing rigid restrictions on how a landlord can thoughtfully manage their property, one of the unintended consequences of this policy will be that some people decide it is better not to invest in rental properties. This may be a great windfall for people looking for owner-occupied properties, but it decreases the number of rental homes that are available to the renters that you are working to protect. The landlords are not the problem. The lack of supply of affordable rental properties is the problem. As a legislature, you may be patting yourselves on the back that you are sticking up for tenants, but your proposals are short-sighted and will have many unintended consequences. The tenants who happen to be in an acceptable living situation now will reap a reward. When units come up for rent, any thoughtful landlord will then be forced by the system to charge the highest possible rent the market will bear, because they know in the future their choices are restricted. This gives an ever more valuable bonus to renters who currently profit by staying in place, and penalizes any renters looking for a new situation. There are many studies that say that rent control does not work in the long run. Rent control is not the solution. Supply is the issue. The currently proposed legislation is a feel-good token that lets legislators feel like you are making a difference. The way to truly make a difference is to figure out a way to increase supply. Make it easier and more cost-effective to be a landlord. Take away costly regulations. Make it easier and more cost-effective to build more housing.
Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Critesburg. I'm a Portland landlord myself, and I manage hundreds of housing units for other property owners, and I must say I'm very confused. I thought that the objective that all citizens in Oregon agree upon is that we want more housing of high quality statewide. So why then, all of that, would we consider passing a bill that works against these objectives in every possible way? By artificially suppressing the rents that can be earned by our citizens who choose to build or own real estate and offer it for rent, less rental housing will be built and owned and offered to tenants. You know that. By increasing the risk of citizens of losing control of who lives in their real estate, there will be fewer citizens willing to offer their real estate to tenants. You know that. By increasing the cost of citizens who are willing to offer their homes as rentals for a year or two, And by making them responsible for outrageous relocation fees, fewer citizens will risk offering their homes as rentals. You know that. By holding down rents while other costs continue to increase, the citizens who do own rental housing will have no choice but to reduce the money spent on maintenance, thereby reducing housing quality. You know that. And by degrading incentives to own and offer real estate as rental housing, we will have less rental housing and create rental shortages, and in turn reducing the desire of companies who may otherwise come to Oregon for the benefit of all Oregonians. You know that. I mean, these are the logical and obvious consequences of this bill. So why then, with all that you know, would you support the bill? You know better. We all know better. Thanks.
My name is Nancy Mistura. Before I was a property manager, I was a landlord. Before I was a landlord, I was a tenant. But before that, I was an immigrant. My family came to the U.S. when I was 2. We came from a city, a town that had no running water, no electricity, with dirt floors. We came here with the American dream, because the American dream was that if you work hard, you know, you and your family can get, you know, ahead. You can save up. I, at the age of 17, ran away from my house, from my parents. Hadn't finished high school, but they instilled in me a great work ethic, an entrepreneurial spirit. So I, at the age of 24, purchased my own and very first house. It was my dream to work a job, but only to the means that I can build my own residual income and then give back to the community. I, at the age of 25, went through the whole system and was certified to become a foster parent, because that's what I want to do with my time, not work. No. So I made plans and I executed them and I saved and I put myself in a position where I could, you know, do that for myself. I understand there's a great instability and hardship for tenants right now. There's no dismissing that. But the solution is not to take from one group to give to another. That does a great disservice to all parties involved. Not only are you taking hard-earned money from me and landlords, but you're then giving the money to people who have not been financially prepared as to the use of that money. Our education system fails us. I didn't learn how to balance a checkbook, how to make a budget, how to make a resume, what the difference between the Roth and a simple IRA are. I learned that all by just working my tail off, honestly.